Pintel woke the next morning with a splitting headache and a pig in his face. He let out a hog-like grunt himself and pushed the animal away. A whole chorus of grunts and oinks sounded up around him as he rolled onto his back in the mud. It wasn't until he heard flies buzzing and discovered a brown mass that wasn't mud right next to his head that he realized where he was. The pirate sat up and clutched his head with a groan. The blazing sunlight beyond the edges of the pigsty's nice shady roof only compounded his agony. What had happened last night? The last thing he remembered was being in the 12 Daggers cantina, downing his third pint of rum, or had it been his fourth, with a gaggle of cheering onlookers huddled around his table. He'd been having some sort of silly contest with Ragetti. "Rags," he pushed out weakly. Even that made him feel like someone was pressing a sea urchin into his brain. "Rags!" He heard something shuffle overhead. Next came a loud tumbling sound, like a runaway barrel rolling along a dock. It traveled from the center of the sty's slanted roof out to its edge above the entranceway. Then a gangly figure that could only be Ragetti plummeted into view. The one-eyed man hit the ground with a thud. Poochie's shaggy head poked up from outside in response and rattled off a startled chain of barks. Pintel's concern only carried him a few feet to the entranceway before the dog's racket made him keel over, covering his ears. "Poochie," he moaned. "Stow it!" The canine quit barking and looked away. Pintel half wondered if the former jailer really had just tortured him in rags on purpose. Then an ungodly roar of pain from his friend made him look forward again. Now Ragetti was sitting himself up against a support beam with his own hands to his forehead. "Pin," the younger man said through gritted teeth. "What happened last night?" Pintel rested his head back in the muck. He had no clue how Rags had wound up on the pigsty's roof, but if the kid was well enough to be grouchy, he was probably fine. "I think we might be just a wee bit out of practice with rum," the elder croaked. "And maybe, just maybe, we might have gone a smidge overboard with it last night." He winced at another oink next to his ear. "But I think the 12 Daggers is very used to dealing with gents like us." "Serves us bloody right," Pintel sighed. Two other voices started to prick at his ears just then. Two male voices, each as gruff and salty as the other. They were coming from around the corner of the building next door, most likely the 12 Daggers, and they seemed to be growing louder by the second. The sound of their approaching footsteps put Pintel even more on edge. "I still thinks we should go north around Hispaniola. It'll cut the next leg of our voyage in half if we does, and we can make port in Puerto Plata along the way." "Aye, we could, but we'd have to pass Monte Cristi on the way to Puerto Plata." "So pass it then. Ain't no harm in getting too close. It's still a pirate port. Most ports this side of the Caribbean still are." "Aye, but it's the kind of pirates what make port at 'em what have me worried. You've heard all the stories same as I have, and I ain't sailing me ship near any port what's been said to have a black-sailed ship in its harbor." Pintel snapped his head up again. "Since when is every black-sailed ship a cursed ship?" the first voice objected. "Since all this madness of the past 10 years has given me reason to assume it so," the second, clearly a captain, retorted. "Even the bleeding Navy's been shaking in their boots and spinning tales about the Black Peril these days, so I've heard." Pintel's head started pounding like a drum as his heart beat faster. He eagerly sat up anyway and dared to squint into that wretched sunlight past the sty's entranceway. Sure enough, 2 grizzled sea rats in long weathered coats were trotting past it. Even Ragetti in all his nausea was listening alertly to their conversation now. The look he sent back to Pintel was unmistakable. "What should we do?" "Eh?" the pirate who wasn't captain remarked. "And those tales all end with the Navy defeating the Pearl. So either the Crown's been spinning bullocks' tales about investing what they knows is a bullock ship to try and make us more afraid of 'em, or the tales is true, and the Pearl ain't a threat no more." "Well, whichever it is, we ain't discussing no courses to Monte Cristi till there ain't no more talk of a black-sailed ship making port there." Pintel clawed his way to the pigsty's entrance like a frantic tortoise and spilled out onto the street behind the pair.
Oi!
He half slurred, half howled up at them.
How do you get to Monte Cristi from here, mates?
It was the perfect solution. How had Pintel not thought of it sooner? Of course he and Rags should track down the Black Pearl. What place in the world was home to them now more than that formerly cursed ship? Sure, it would likely take them a fine trick to secure their places aboard the vessel once they found her, especially if Jack Sparrow had reunited with her like the soldiers in Port Royal's prison had whispered. But if Abner Pintel could find his way out of both the Navy and prison, he was sure he could find his way onto one bloody ship, even if he had to throw Sparrow overboard to get there. He and Ragetti would find and retake the Pearl. They'd be home, they'd be free, and with the fastest and most feared vessel in the Caribbean at their command, they'd soon be rich men. And then, perhaps, Rags would finally be Rags again. But first they'd have to find the Pearl. It hadn't taken much effort to pry the location of Monte Cristi out of those two bickering pirates. Pintel suspected that his eruption from the pigsty had alarmed them so much that once they'd realized the bald, stocky, mud-stained creature addressing them was just a man and not a talking hog, they'd been thrilled to answer his every question. The real challenge had come after that, when he and Ragetti had tried asking around for passage to Monte Cristi. They and the rest of Barbossa's crew must have truly put the fear of their ship into the hearts of every sailor, because no captain on all of Tortuga seemed to want to venture anywhere near the Pearl's rumored location that day. No reason to fret. Monte Cristi was only about 70 miles east of Tortuga, and since good old Poochie had actually been guarding all of Pintel and Ragetti's possessions outside the pigsty, they were well equipped to row that distance themselves. Still, they could be better equipped. Nothing could compare to the way Tortuga's taverns came alive at night, but its marketplace during the day pulled a close second. Pirates needed to sell the cargo that they plundered after all, and who better to sell it to than other pirates? No civilized market would allow such rampant haggling or bartering, let alone the exchanges of certain favors for goods in place of payment, and the frequent fights that broke out over prices would have surely ended in the arrest of at least one party each time. Pintel took it all in with a smile that afternoon, despite his lingering headache. Ragetti must have been feeling nostalgic too, because one of his first purchases had been an even dozen of bright green Granny Smith apples, inspired by their late Captain Barbossa, no doubt. Pintel was currently watching in the corner of his eye as his friend tried to eat one, and it was taking all of the old schemer's willpower not to laugh each time he saw the kid take a bite and seize up from the sourness. He remembered Rags always buying mangoes from Kingston's marketplace back in the day. Pintel had never seen the appeal of those orange and green fruits. They were just messy, overgrown peaches with even bigger pits, and being from the Far East made them slightly more expensive. Not to mention you had to practically carve them up like a roast when you ate them. Rags had learned the trick of that, though, and he'd been happy to teach it to anyone who asked. Pintel had spied him doing just that with a local girl in that Kingston marketplace once. He could still picture the two of them, neither a day over 15, seated together on that bench beside the fruit stand, and holding a mango in place between them. He remembered Ragetti guiding the girl's fingers around it, showing her how to feel for the pit's edges, the girl's giggling and playful glances, and his boy's absolute cluelessness as to what was going on in her head. Youth really was wasted on the young. At least Rags had looked happy eating his half of that mango.
Here you go, chum,
A gravelly voice interrupted.
Thinnest kind we has, best for fishing line. Use it all the time myself.
Pintel shook off the memory and blinked at the ball of twine in front of him. He took it from the vendor's hand and studied it. How much?
1 shilling.
You pulling me leg? Blimey, first rum-up's up in price and now this. The vendor shrugged.
It's called inflation, chum. We merchants, honest or otherwise, gotta keep up with it. Although I dare say them new suppliers seem to fancy gouging the prices these days.
Pintel frowned and turned over the twine ball's tag. Stamped on it was a 3-pronged logo with the letters EICO nestled in its corners. East India Company, he deciphered.
trading company they prefers,"
the vendor muttered. "I've sold some of their wares before," the bald pirate said. "Stingy bigwig blighters, the lot of 'em."
"And those ain't even the worst letters they like stamping on things. I've met 3 gents, each arrested and escaped from those blighters, who had a letter P branded on him somewheres to show for it."
Pintel narrowed his eyes strangely.
"Branded?"
"P for pirate," Ragetti interjected just then. He sounded haunted. "They brands you for life so's they can catch you easier if you gets away the first time. No forgiveness."
"How do you knows that?"
Pintel asked him. "Jack Sparrow's got one. Saw it on his wrist back when we first joined his crew. Captain Barbossa told me what it meant." It sent a chill down the older jailbird's spine. Imagine if the Navy had ever branded them.
"You see much of this East India Trading Company around these parts?"
Pintel asked the vendor with growing concern. The other man creased his brow darkly.
"More nowadays. Practically every merchant ship in the Caribbean's flying their colours now. Captain of the last one my crew boarded didn't even mind us looting her. Said the company board ships like his mid-voyage for inspections sometimes, and he could at least respect pirates for never slapping no fines on him. Nice fellow. Even tapped some wine for us on his deck just to cost his employers one more bit of profit."
"Makes you glad you doesn't have to pay for your supplies," Pintel mused.
"Speaking of paying..."
"Aye, aye." Pintel dumped 12 pence coins onto the booth's counter and trudged away once the vendor finished counting them. Ragetti walked a hair closer than normal to his comrade as he and Poochie followed. "Trading companies boarding ships," the youth whispered.
"Tall tales,"
the elder said dismissively.
"Salesmen tell 'em even better than sailors."
Boy, did he hope he was right.
"While we're on the subject of stories," he continued, "you mind explaining what you bought that can of salt for?"
Ragetti gave it a loud shake. "Preservatives. I figured if you're gonna keep trying at fishing, I'd try at becoming a real buccaneer."
"Becoming one? Rags, you already is one. What you think we've been doing all these years?"
"Pin, some pirates is buccaneers, but not all buccaneers is pirates. It comes from the French words viande boucanier, what means smoked meat. Buccaneers is people what make and sell jerky." Pintel rolled his eyes. "Not this again."
"Barbossa tell you that too?"
"No, he didn't," Ragetti said matter-of-factly. The duo rode out from Tortuga late that afternoon. They didn't reach Monte Cristi until late the next evening. They made the most of those 30 hours abroad. Pintel fastened a fishing rod from a long piece of driftwood in some of the twine he'd bought, along with a hook, a cork, and a little tuft of a lure that he'd scrounged off the street. He and Ragetti took turns angling with it in between their turns rowing the longboat. The only catch anyone on their little vessel made was a hand-sized mackerel that Poochie dove into the surf after and grabbed in his teeth as they headed to shore for the night. Their campsite was on the northern coast of Hispaniola. They had real food and water in their inventory by then, also bought in Tortuga, but Pintel still made a point to clean and cook Poochie's mackerel while Ragetti prepared his salt. The taller pirate also saw fit to scurry up another palm tree for a fully grown coconut that night. The next morning, they had a handful of coconut-seasoned fish jerky strips for breakfast. Not a winner, but they deemed it a success nonetheless. They also had a pair of ridiculous-looking helmets that Ragetti had carved from the 2 empty halves of the coconut's husk. Pintel would have scoffed at the headgear if he hadn't already witnessed their inventor getting punched in the face and falling off a roof, or if his own pain from those ordeals hadn't started to remind him how vulnerable the two of them were now that their curse was lifted. Besides, a productive Ragetti was a positive Ragetti, and Pintel took that as a sign of good things to come. Helmets on their heads and equipment on board, the rogue seafarers pushed their longboat back into the water and rode the tide out from shore for the final leg of their voyage. It was dark when they came rowing into Monte Cristi's harbor. That didn't help them to spot a black-sailed ship at the docks. The pair scanned that lineup of vessels all the same as they approached the port, and when that failed to locate the Pearl, they moored their boat to the nearest station and paced up and down along the boardwalks for a closer look. All the while, the fading excitement on Ragetti's face reflected the knot of dread that Pintel felt growing in his own gut. They still didn't find their ship. The two of them stood in silence on the docks for a moment as the truth set in. Neither of them looked at the other. 70 miles, Pintel thought. We just rode 70 miles for nothing. The sound of jingling keys alerted him to Poochie's whereabouts. The dog was just at the base of the neighboring dock, nosing at a thoroughly sloshed man and woman who had looked like a pile of cargo sacks a minute ago. When the couple suddenly flailed to life, Pintel figured he may as well approach them. "Evening, folks," he said without affect. "You happen to see a ship with black sails round here?" The woman let out a laugh that could peel paint.
That ship? She's been gone for a week.
Pintel squared his jaw.
You happen to speak to a captain?
The woman took on a much more sultry tone at the memory.
Yes, we did.
"He ain't here no more either," the man grunted mostly to her.
Well, did he say where he was gonna be?
Pintel pressed on impatiently. "Baracoa," the man huffed. Ragetti came inching towards them then. "Baracoa? That ain't a pirate port."
It's definitely what he said, that Jack Sparrow,
the woman insisted dreamily.
Said he were looking for bananas and spiced rum, and that north coast of Cuba were the place to find the best of both.
The hiccup that punctuated her story chipped away some of the credibility. Still, it was better than no lead at all. Pintel awkwardly bid the couple a nice evening, then ushered Ragetti and Poochie away.
"We're gonna do some asking round about this,"
he declared with a growl. "What if it's true?" Ragetti asked. "What if Sparrow really did sell the Black Pearl to an honest port?" Pintel eyed the bustling town ahead like a shark that smelled blood.
"Then we'll just have to pretend to be honest men."